and welcome to the Yearbooking Report podcast, an independent resource for yearbook advisors and staffs across America and beyond. I'm Scott Giese. Thanks for tuning in. We hope your school year is going well, and you haven't hit any yearbook roadblocks, although those are sometimes inevitable, aren't they? For veteran advisors listening, you know what I mean. And for more rookie advisors, don't let the roadblocks slow you down. In this episode of the Yearbooking Report podcast, we recognize that maybe one of those roadblocks might just be how your staff or group is organized or isn't organized. In my 25 years as a yearbook company representative, I encountered far too many yearbook staffs that had no real organization. Just a bunch of people thrown together trying to make a book. Headaches soon to follow. For a class or club setting, what are some tips and ideas to use to create a strong, well-organized staff? And if it's students we're talking about, how to get them doing more of the leading so you don't have to. For that, we reached out to someone that I think is one of the top yearbook advisors in the country, Mike Simmons from Corning Painted Post High School in Corning, New York. Now, if you're not familiar, that's not the New York City area, but so-called upstate New York, halfway across the state near the Pennsylvania border. Not a big population area, not a booming business area, but every year the Tesserae yearbook is one of the top volumes in America. And a lot of that is how Mike deals with his student staff, how they're organized, how they get things done, and come out with lots of smiles along the way. Get ready for a ton of great advice for any yearbook staff or group, that's elementary school up to college. We talked to Mike in August before the new school year began.
Well, first off, let me welcome Mike Simmons from Southern New York State to the Yearbooking Report podcast. Mike, first off, welcome, and thank you for joining me today.
I really appreciate you having me on, man. It's a beautiful day here. We're into August, so casting our eyes back on getting back to school. I'm meeting with my staff next week.
Back to school. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been trying to track this guy down for weeks. I mean, this is one of the busiest men in America. Holy mackerel. But we got some great stuff here we're going to discuss. We're going to talk about student journalism in general. Later on, especially, we're going to talk about yearbook. And we're going to talk about yearbook organization, especially, I would say, staff organization. Because, Mike, you and I have been at this a long time. I was a company representative for 25 years. And during that time, a well-organized staff that really works well, for some reason, a lot of schools don't handle that very well. So we're going to offer some tips and ideas and suggestions coming up a little bit later on. First off, for folks who don't know you, let's start with you. Let's get some background information about you. What is, how long have you been teaching? Where are you? What are your specialties? And then maybe get a bit more into your Tesserae group, which I think is outstanding. What is special about your group? All right, so let's start. Tell us something about you, please.
So I'm originally from Southern New Hampshire, and I always tell my students that I was not one of them when I was in high school. I was much cooler. I was a drum major, the marching band, and a theater tech kid. But I found yearbook coming up on 25 years ago. I moved newly to town with my wife. We had just gotten married and quickly fell in with, this is my first real job, fell in with the yearbook advisor and his staff. And we run a dual model where we have a yearbook photo advisor and then the main content advisor, the contact to the plant and the business and all the rest. And a very long story short, the photo advisor slipped and fell on some ice when she was 8 months pregnant. Ooh. And had the baby prematurely. Everything was fine. But the principal at the time, this was back in 2001, said, "Hey, you're always hanging out with that yearbook guy. Go do yearbook." And that patch of ice literally changed the course of my life. So it's a fun story to tell. It's all absolutely true. That photo advisor that had the baby is now our superintendent. So we are, I will say, both appreciated esteemed and protected administratively, which is a really nice place to be. They know the power of student journalism, and my kids have free reign to report. No prior review, no restraint, no censorship. We have a really healthy relationship with our administration. We're over here in Western New York, about dead center over the middle of Pennsylvania. Um, I've got a school of about 1,450 kids, and Tesserae, we merged two rival schools back in 2014, East and West. I was the West High advisor, and when we knew the merge was going to happen, I actually advised both schools' yearbooks simultaneously. So I did 4 books in 2 years, which was, I never, ever, ever, ever want to do that again. But we are going into year 12 at the merged campus, and I'm really proud to say that Tesserae has put New York on the map, on the national stage. The kids have earned quite a number of accolades, and I just couldn't be more proud of the program that we've created, but really within the program, the young people that we've created, because it's been wonderful.
Now, call this a transparency alert, of course, of sorts. Mike is from the Corning, New York area, which is southern New York State, the southern tier of New York.
That's right.
The area that I used to work was primarily the northern part of Pennsylvania, which is usually called the northern tier. And up your direction, that's usually referred to as the twin tiers because they're very alike, rather rural for the most part, not an economic engine, in other words, struggles and so on, not boom towns or anything like that. So yeah, Mike, when I see your group kind of right in the middle of that, I'm thinking, man, this is a group that's doing great things, not necessarily with big money and suburban areas and all that sort of stuff. You do some really, really good stuff. So that's terrific. And
Thank
at
you.
your school, all right, Tesserae is the yearbook, and we're going to talk more yearbook a little bit. You also do other student journalism things at your school. If you would talk a little bit about that, what are some of the other journalism elements that you do at your school? And then just sort of a general question, all right, here, schools are struggling in different ways, education and, I don't know, funding and other things. What is your sort of overall view of student journalism today? And by the way, folks, Yearbook, of course, is part of student journalism. It's not separate. It's there. It's in. So talk about some of the other things you do at your school, and then sort of the general, I don't know, maybe student journalism is struggling today. What do you think about all that, Mike?
So I also advise CPB TV, which I would call kind of a J1 intro and broadcast class. The output of it is a daily, I'm going to say news notes, not capital N news, but also announcements and school life, kind of 6-minute piece that starts our day. We have 2 sections of that. One is the live show and the support around it. And then we have a production class that creates video segments, also creates some podcast content. But more than anything, that is a pipeline to get kids interested in journalism, develop some foundations, inculcate in them a sense of the responsibilities and rights within the First Amendment. Interviewing, of course, is a huge piece, and we do some units on video editing for segment and for podcast editing as well. It's a lot of fun. But really, those are the 1, 2. I came to it via Yearbook. I went to Indiana University. It has one of the top media and journalism schools in the country. I actually got my master's from Mizzou, which has one of the other top journalism schools in the country, and never touched it until I was here. I was a special education teacher when Yearbook found me. Additionally, as an aside, at CPP at Corning, I teach a computer science and a separate information technology class. I manage the rock wall and advise the rock climbing club, and I direct the basketball pet band in the winter. Out of school, I coach 2 robotics teams, so it keeps me busy. But all my activities are things that my own children do. And teenagers are my jam. Just what I'm called to do, and I recognize that. I was lucky to recognize that early in life, so I like staying busy. Speaking of teenagers, I think I can answer your question about the state of student journalism very succinctly in that we know about the decline. It's well researched, well reported. The facts are there, the decline of so much local news. In the time that we've lived here in Corning, we've gone from a local daily, The Leader, that had 2 photographers full time and a crew of, I think, 8 reporters, there maybe a copy editor and their editor in chief. There is no presence in their old offices at all. We now get the Elmira Star Gazette content through Gannett, and the Gannett content goes to Elmira and Corning both. And it's sadly, it's paper thin, and I don't mean that as a joke. It's like 8 sheets folded. And I remember when we got here, much, much, much more robust. So simply this, the value and the worth of student journalism in our schools and our communities these days is that the only people telling stories of our students are our students. There's a modest local sports beat for some of our varsity sports and things like that. But for all the stories that matter to these kids, and I'm not just talking about, and there's validity here, but not just talking about Spotify playlists and trends on TikTok, but politics and marriage rights and the climate and mental health and high stakes testing, and all the rest of it. I could go on and on and on. We see some of the most timely, certainly actionable, and definitely embedded reporting on those topics coming from student journalists themselves, covering their classmates, and telling the stories of those communities. I got into it a little bit. Actually, one of my editors got into it. Her name's Peyton. This was probably 8 years ago at a local superintendent's gathering. This goes back to censorship, but it's illustrative. She said she was talking to this superintendent from the next town up, from Watkins Glen. You might know Scott. And he said, well, I would never let our yearbook or newspaper publish without seeing it first. I have a responsibility to make our community look appealing. We want to make sure that we attract families and that they're interested in what we have to offer. And I was thinking to myself, as my editor was giving him the what for on a hands-off approach to student journalism, like, what could be more attractive to a family than to say, from an administrative level, we believe in the voices and perspectives of our students, right? For me, that's a singular, just beautiful use case or articulation of why a hands-off approach to student journalism matters. And our superintendents, my prior and the gal now who was the yearbook photo advisor, they have said to us, to my kids, they've said it directly to my kids, they've said it to their colleagues, other superintendents. We believe in the voices and perspectives of our students. And if they raise tough issues, if they make us question where we are, if they have questions about where we are, who we are, or where we're going as a school or a community, even if those questions make us uncomfortable or they beget uncomfortable conversations, those are topics and conversations worth addressing. And I think that that's really impressive.
Mike, I tell you what, for what it's worth, all right, I live near State College, Pennsylvania. We still have a daily paper, but of course it's not a paper. And their old printing facility, which I used to visit a lot many years ago when I was working for a sports publication, is now a car dealership.
Right.
And yeah, I drive past it frequently and I look over, I'm like, boy, those cars look really nice, but that's not what that building was built for. So
Yeah.
Believe me. Now let's morph onto a connected topic here. All right. Folks that are really in the know have heard of something called New Voices legislation. This is a national thing, but state by state. And the idea is to give student journalists essentially the same protections that professional journalists get. And Mike, you shared your, story there about censorship and so on. I have seen it. Now, you've been sort of a champion of this in New York and elsewhere. Briefly talk about New Voices legislation. Is it in New York? And apparently, I guess only 1/3 of the states right now have this. I'm not sure why all of them don't. I think they should. Talk about that if you would, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So I got involved in spring of 2017, at the dawn of the first Trump administration, through a concern that was raised about some of the reporting that my students had done. And we got clear, it was reported via social media. And so folks in town got themselves in a tizzy, and we navigated it with our superintendent and administration. Came out the other side with Frank Lamonti at the time from the Student Press Law Center in Washington, D.C., saying, you guys should really take a look at New Voices, because New York is not a New Voices state yet. New Voices started with the John Wall Act in North Dakota, which I'm going to come back to, because North Dakota, I don't know if it's an irony here or whatnot. But Steve Listopad, who now is in Arkansas, started a modern campaign to equip students, as you said, with the same rights and responsibilities that the pros enjoy under the First Amendment. We have a two-tiered system for student journalism and student speech in the country. You've got the Tinker Law from 1969, Mary Beth and Chris Eckert and John Tinker, the black armbands, and Justice Abe Fortas saying that when students walk through the schoolhouse gate, they do not lose their fundamental constitutional rights. So pro First Amendment and student speech matters. And then at East Hazelwood, out there in the Midwest, there was reporting in 1985 in the East Hazelwood Spectrum newspaper, two articles on the double truck at the middle of the newspaper, one about pregnancy and one about a student's experience of divorce. And the principal in 85 spiked both of those stories, and the newspaper came out with these big white blocks on that edition. And Kathy Kuhlmeyer and some of her fellow student journalists sued, and it went all the way to the Supremes. And the Supreme said, nope, if there is legitimate pedagogical concern, whatever that means, because it's really muddy, then principals or administrators can censor student speech. So flash forward all the way to today. We've got, I think right now, our head count is 18 New Voices states, and that includes some of the old classics. California had a student expression law way back, and the rest. And you can see this at splc.org if you want the map or more information on New Voices. But we here in New York and y'all in Pennsylvania, Texas, Nebraska, many states have active New Voices campaigns. We've been on it again since 2017. Took a little bit of a hiatus last year because just with New York, the budget kind of siphons off or sucks all the oxygen out of the room, and it was very hard for us to get much headway. But we've been at it now, 8 years, and looking to get back to it in the fall with our session. And fundamentally, it's to ensure that we don't have two classes of student expression within one school, not even different states, Hazelwood and Tinker states, but recognize that for those of you listening, it is firmly ensconced in case law that students could have a sit-in or some kind of protest march. Their rights are protected to have that march. Maybe there's a pro White House administration march, or maybe there's an anti-White House administration march. Whatever the administration is, it truly doesn't matter for this example. The kids' rights to have that march are known and are certain. But if you're in a Tinker state, student journalists could cover that. Go for it. In a Hazelwood state, you could have the march and then have the principal say, but the newspaper can't cover it. And that's what we're trying to address, is that student journalists aren't second-class citizens in their own schools.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned a bunch of names there, Mary Beth Tinker, Kathy Kuhlmeyer. Those were students, not adults, that essentially pushed these court cases with the help of some adults, Sure. Lawyers and stuff along the way. And so for any students that may be checking this out and hey, that's something we're interested in. This is really a student-driven thing.
Absolutely.
And
yes.
It's interesting. Pennsylvania sounds a lot like New York. They're talking about it down in Harrisburg, our state capital, and that's about as far as it's gotten. And you're right, the state budget, poof, just sucks up all the air out of the room. So.
We'll get back to more with advisor Mike Simmons from Corning, New York in a bit. We'll get into the nuts and bolts of student leadership, how to choose student leaders and have them making decisions. We'll have that and a lot more in just a moment. How's your year been going so far? Boffo, I hope. Oh boy, does anybody use that term anymore? That means really great, by the way. If that's not you, that's okay. You're not alone. Let me share some advice from 25 years as a yearbook company representative, and it's simply get your company rep more directly involved with you and your staff. This assumes that you work with a company that has some representative, either in person or by phone or even just email. A big part of that person's job is to make your job easier. And yet, in 25 years, I had, frankly, too many situations where an advisor had some issue and I was never alerted. I could have helped them quickly if I had just known. Treat your rep as your partner, not as your adversary, which sometimes happens. Trust your rep. They have your back. And freely share information with them. That includes financial information as well. Ad sales revenue, fundraiser sales, money in your school account right now, anything. Part of the rep's job is to make sure your budget ends in the black, not the red. That means they need full information to make accurate budgets, projections, and decisions. And hopefully, your rep is comfortable in front of a class or a club or a group to help you teach yearbook to everybody. Make them an active member of your team. Keep them in the loop. Message them regularly. Never be a stranger. If they can't stop in, they can probably Zoom or something similar. I'm saying this on behalf of every single yearbook rep out there, whatever company. They want to serve you well, but the first step is just to let them. If they stumble or really drop the ball down the stretch, okay, maybe it's time to look elsewhere. But if they've been serving you well, then those inevitable low-price merchants that knock on your door won't be as appealing just because they have a low price. Can they back it up? Your rep has earned the loyalty of you and your school, I hope, and that's a reward for their hard work. Now let's get back to our conversation with advisor Mike Simmons of Corning, New York, on great yearbook staff organization here on the Yearbooking Report.
All right, let's talk yearbook. And again, our main subject here is we want to talk about organizing your staff well. Because again, Mike, my 25 years plus of observation, most schools simply don't do this well. I'm not trying to be harsh, just trying to be truthful. And so that's why I reached out to you, because I know your group is very well organized. Let me start with an opening question here. Again, I don't know how often maybe you get out to other schools and anything, connections and so on. Why is this such a difficult concept to have a student driven, in this case, editor type group and so on? Why do so many yearbook advisors seemingly really, have a hard time with this? Do you have any thoughts there, Mike?
I think some of it may go back to what we were just speaking about administratively, which is the charge to some advisors, or a concern at the advisor level of, if I get this wrong, or if my kids overstep, or this gets out of hand, my job is on the line. And that results then very quickly in a very tight control of the given program, and a reluctance to let go and to empower the kids. I try to take the long view. The program is mine. The classroom is very much mine. The newsroom, the book, the reporting is the kids. And when I say the program is mine, there's a Venn diagram in there somewhere where I want the kids to have ownership of the program, a sense of legacy, and of setting us up both for success in the present and in the long term in the future. But I always say to the kids, like, if we or you make a particular decision here, recognize that I'm the one that's going to be here 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 8 years from now, that has to deal with, repercussions. I think whether we're talking about club or classroom, I'm a classroom guy. We have it in our curriculum. Those interests certainly impact I think the buy-in, the longevity of students and student leadership. And students leading students is difficult, right? Even my experience of a lot of varsity sports, yes, you have captains, maybe they lead warm-ups and things, but I see many of my coach friends, colleagues, whom I love and appreciate and enjoy very much, are really calling all the shots on the field. And so to be an advisor to say, okay, first voice today in the lab when the bell rings is going to be the editors, is my editors in chief. First voice every day is going to be my editors in chief. That takes work. That takes, and maybe we'll get into this, but firm and well-articulated understandings of role and responsibility, pre-communication. If I have a class sixth and seventh period, I see about half my staff sixth, half my staff seventh. If I have an editor in chief making announcements at the start of sixth period, I need time with them fourth or fifth or an email second to say, hey, here are the things I need you to highlight because I've been doing this a quarter century now and I can yearbook, I have to think about it. I don't just make it up as I go along, but there's got to be a plan. There's got to be some goals and kind of the overarching arc of a day, a week, or a deadline cycle. So that communication can be a lot. And I think is a frustration or a tough nut to crack for some advisors doing that work in the first place. I think scaling, I've worked with last year, my staff started with 58 kids. We ended the year with 54. But right now, I'm opening this year with 45, so 13 fewer kids on paper. It's kind of anomalous, but I'm not too worried about it. But within that, I have just over a dozen editors because we take kind of a departmental approach, and we can talk hopefully more about that. But they've learned by watching the editors before and the editors before and the editors before. And I would say if we're talking today with any advisors that maybe have, I'm going to say tighter, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but tighter kind of primary advisor control, maybe some of the advice that you're going to be hearing, it might sound like a lot. It might sound threatening. It might sound too loosey-goosey. But I want anybody listening to recognize that it's been a process and that I wouldn't want anybody coming away from listening to our conversation thinking you flip a switch and okay, it's an editor-led newsroom. This maybe people again hearing this episode, this could be a 2 or a 4 or a 5 year process of shifting the culture toward that student ownership.
All right. Yeah, I was going to say probably we've got some advisors checking this out. Like they heard you say 45 kids. They're like, oh my gosh, I have
Yeah.
5. I have
Yes.
10.
Yes.
Now,
Yep.
maybe they might be thinking right now, okay, everything this guy says is big. I only have 10 kids on my staff. I can't do this. If you encountered an advisor with a response like that, what would your response be?
Everything scales. Everything scales. I'm going to assume, for the most part, that a 10-person staff, and I know that I've been wrong about this in the past, but a 10-person staff may be from a school smaller than ours, and then perhaps a book by page count that's smaller than ours. You're always going to need a chief decision maker, right? It's in the name, editor in chief. I happen to work with 3 editors in chief, and it means that I always have a decision maker in the room because a lot of my go-getter editor level kids are multi-sport varsity athletes or they're on stage with drama clubs. So by stacking the deck in my favor and having a team work with that, again, I know I've always got that decision maker in the room. But having a chief, having an art director or layout and design editor, having a wordsmith who's a solid copy editor, and probably having a photo decision maker in the mix, those would be my first 4. Yearbook is a business. I'd be interested in a business manager or business editor role to handle some of that as well. I always tell, I walk into conventions and things. I have this joke that I've been using for probably 20 years. What's the number one job of the yearbook staff? And hands fly and they say to record and preserve the history of the year. And I look at them and point and I say, that's adorable. And it's also wrong. Because if we're not selling the books, then all that people like me get is big, heavy boxes of spent money hanging out in my office. So we really prioritize business first. How do we sell the book? Well, it's by including people and telling authentic stories and engaging with our student body. It's a close 1-2. I'm sure you understand. But I think scaling in structure to address kind of as I outlined those core competencies that a yearbook needs to deliver on: photo, design, copy, and that ultimate decision maker that is like my right and left hand simultaneously, I think that's a really good place to start. And I would argue, and in my experience, I've seen it be able to scale quite well. And if I misspeak, and we've got, sorry to continue, a larger school with a smaller staff, I might say, well, then let's look at that culture shift as well, because a school of 1,400 kids absolutely should have a 20-person yearbook staff, like no question about that whatsoever. And shifting those culture norms around yearbook is something that I've been really passionate about and working with staffs too.
Mike, we apparently are twins. All right. We both wear glasses. And for years, Mike, I've said there's two halves to this job. There's making the book, and then you've got your sales element. You could
Yeah,
make the best book in school history. If nobody's buying them, you
doesn't
failed.
matter.
I'm
Yep.
sorry. You failed. That's harsh, but it's true. And so I'm glad that you added that extra element because that is really, really important. All right. So you mentioned some roles. You mentioned photo, copy, editor-in-chief, managing business, and so on. How do you choose the students, or
Mm.
how are they chosen for those particular roles? Is it all about seniority? I've seen that. Rarely, it's more about competency, I suppose. Like, yeah, that sophomore kid is really sharp. Maybe we go with him. How do you choose who your student leaders are?
So this is a bit of a complex answer, but I'll try to chunk it.
All right.
I tell my students, and by students in this decision, I usually mean my current editors, because they get to inform the process. I get ultimate say because the program is mine. That's where one of those places where I don't tell them what to write or who to write about, but when we project the future of the program and who is producing and leading next year, if they each get a vote, I get like 60 votes, and I can supersede that. I rarely have to, and I'm proud of that because so often the staff and the current editors recognize who is best suited to the job. And every year around April or so, I offer a two-pronged, I use Google Forms to do it, but a two-pronged question. Put yourself out there if you would like to be considered for an editor-in-chief or other editor role, and tell me what you're interested in and where you think your strengths and weaknesses lend themselves, and talk to me about that a little bit, and fill out a couple of questions. And then the second one is, hey, staff, who do you think is capable, has proved themselves, and will do right by the program in the year ahead? And I'll tell you, I don't think of that as a vote, even though you could put the screws to me and say that's exactly a vote, but it is, for me, an indication of support. And we get to this place where the kids really see it happening, and we end up with a great result year after year after year. So I'll tell you, we had 40 kids. Some didn't respond to the survey. Had 40 kids respond about that who should lead question this year. And one of my editors got 29 out of 40 kids saying it should be her. And I just think that that's such an awesome. I mean, the next closest was, I think, 19. So that kid had it going on. And the day that we announced that she was one of the three, the place just erupted because everybody saw it coming. I talk a lot with my kids about where their priorities are in the year ahead, right? So we get that initial, like, would you please consider me for photo editor? And we also get the, I think Johnny would make a really good editor in chief or a really good photo editor. I get those streams of data, and the kids that put themselves forward, I say, hey, come talk to me. And interview, you could call it that. For me, it's more of a chat. What are your priorities in the year ahead? Are you going to be playing varsity soccer? Where are you with your academics? Things like that. And then I also asked them about the program. What's working for you right now? What was most fulfilling for you this year? What challenged you this year? Where do you think I could do better to support the staff and the program? And, I could talk all day. I try to keep it 20, 25 minutes. It's a time investment, but those are some big decisions because this is the core toolbox that we're using in the year ahead. And again, I think that scales as well. If you're looking for 4 kids, go have those 4 conversations. For me, sometimes I'm talking to 16 or 17 kids over a few weeks. And then one thing last on this, I'm always sure to do is to talk to the current editors in chief in particular, and say, listen, and I'll be pretty transparent with them. I will say I have held back some data sometimes because I don't want, maybe personalities to get in the mix or this or that. But I say, what's your read of the room and what's your read of the program, and what do you, if you were in my shoes, what would you have me do? I will back up and say, usually around Thanksgiving, I remind the entire staff we are, 2.5 months in, the honeymoon is over. And for those of you that are really enjoying this and thinking you want to be a core part of this program next year, recognize that your audition has already begun and it's a year-long process. And I remind people of that time to time because it helps them kind of spruce up a little bit.
That's an interesting thought, Mike. Yeah, the honeymoon is over, which nobody wants to hear, and
Yeah.
it's like, okay, you're auditioning right now, so
Yes.
that probably makes some kids think. All right, now the next step. All right, the student leaders are chosen. All right,
Yep.
you've got them set up. How do you guide them through decision making? Do you guide them? Maybe you go to the back of the room and just sort of stand there like, okay, guys, go right ahead. I'll just kind of watch. How do you handle when they're making decisions? Do you get involved? How do you get involved? Or I don't get involved? How do you handle that?
Yeah, so decision making, I'm going to take your question more to mean some of the foundational bits and pieces of the book. I might lift up
Yes.
an example like, are we going to do 10 interrupters this year, feature coverage? Or when we do profiles this year, what are we going to do photographically to really lift it? Not the basic, just football coverage, and are we covering, their warm-up songs? Um, it is most typically, because I've been doing this so long, hey, it's 2 weeks before school. I know these are the decisions we need to be approaching. Hey, we are a week into school. Here's the decisions right now or the decisions coming. And looking to, 10 minutes with my EICs, 15 minutes with my art director, who is or isn't my lead design kid, is or isn't always an editor in chief. Kind of coaching and saying, hey, it's Tuesday. Tomorrow we need to be talking about getting ready to flow our portraits. I'll say that to my reference editor. Things like that. A lot of heads up. Um, I've never had a rookie editor, and that might be an obvious thing to say, but it needs to be said because that means that every editor who I could deputize to go, hey, I need you 2 days from now to teach captioning, to review it with the coverage staff, and you're going to have all the rookies as well. They've already captioned for a year and they know where they're going and what they're doing. So I've got that to fall back on, that at the very least, the vocabulary is familiar to them. They might not have made the decisions themselves last year, but they were around people and around conversations where those decisions were happening. They have last year's product, hopefully near and dear, and can say, oh, when we decided to do this in the index, it was because we had had a conversation about, XYZ. I think I want to answer the question also a little bit differently, and maybe we were getting here. It comes from a place, and I was just in California last week teaching at the Yearbook Summit at Vanguard University, and I said up on the screen, when it comes to roles and responsibilities, you can have the conversation today, or you can have the conversation tomorrow. But one way or another, you're having the conversation, and today is always easier. Meaning, if you have a conversation tomorrow about roles and responsibilities, it probably means that somebody's toes got stepped on, something was missed, or somebody's very upset and maybe in tears. And so it behooves us all, advisors, editors in chief, behooves reps to prompt these conversations with the schools that they support. How do you know who is supposed to do what and when? And I can give you a very specific example because I actually learned this from my wife when she was a dance team instructor. Just very briefly, the anecdote. The beginning of every season, she would sit down and have a conversation with her captains, and they would make an organizational chart. And it would say, Mrs. Simmons' job is to, and stuff would go in a box. Mrs. Simmons' job is not to, stuff goes in a box. The captain's job is to, is not to, and the line member's job is and is not to. And very specifically, the girls always wore gold bows in their hair. And my wife was getting so frustrated that kids were A, being irresponsible on forgetting their bows, but they were all going to her when she's trying to get them on field at a football game. And she was like, I don't have time for that right now. And so it's one specific example that if you needed the gold bow, you always went to the captain. But as finite or maybe weird as that sounds to offer on a yearbook podcast, it's a really specific example of we had the conversation. So when the problem arose, we knew how to deal with it already. And I think when we have those conversations in August in the preseason, certainly in the opening week of school or so, we can help ourselves in February by having those conversations in September. I hope that makes sense.
Hey, that's great advice. That's absolutely great advice. And, maybe to simplify, be proactive, not just reactive.
Yes,
I think
that's a much simpler way to say it.
Yeah, most folks are reactive. It's like,
Yes.
boom, something hit me in the face. Now I have to react to it. Be proactive in that case. All right. Now,
We'll return for one more segment of the Yearbooking Report podcast with advisor Mike Simmons of Corning, New York in just a moment. Oh, great topics coming. Peer mentoring, kids helping kids. Dealing with student drama, oh yes. Getting parents involved, very important, I think, and much more. Stay tuned for some great advice in just a bit. Now, depending on when you're listening here, if it's the fall, maybe it's time for homecoming week for your school or district. From elementary books to college, probably everybody has some homecoming page or spread. My question is, same as last year, and the year before that, and before that. It's easy to fall into the habit of just doing what we did last year, except that every school year is unique. The people are unique. The activities are probably unique. That means your reporting needs to be unique. Make an effort to show how this year's homecoming week was different, with stories, information, even photos taken from different angles. Tell the stories of the eventual king and queen, assuming you have both, and something about the other contestants as well. Everyone wants their stories told, and everyone has stories to tell. Share as many of them as you can to really tell the full story of homecoming this year to be remembered forever. Your homecoming court and your audience will thank you for many years to come. Now let's return for our last segment on good student organization and ways to make your job a lot easier with advisor Mike Simmons here on the Yearbooking Report.
Now, Mike, you kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, the idea of peer mentoring. In other words, you mentioned earlier, you're this and yes, and the rock climbing advisor and all this other band stuff and so on, that if you also then have to do all of the leading and all of the teaching and all of it, I can see why advisors burn out so quickly.
Yeah.
How do you handle peer mentoring where these kids are helping out these kids and everybody works a lot better as a group? How do you handle that?
Yeah, so especially when it comes to coverage, but not only I could illustrate this in our business operations as well. But when it comes to coverage, again, my leaders are veterans, and we look to returning members who aren't editors. Maybe they got some disappointing news that the editor role didn't go their way. I always say, listen, there are so many ways to lead and be an effective leader that have nothing or little to do with the word after your name. It doesn't need to say Mike Simmons, editor, in order for me to lead in the classroom. So I alluded to one thing that we do, it's the captioning instruction, or it could be basic photo composition, like some of those core competencies, interview skills. I have the luxury of years worth of curriculum and content creation that we can rely on, but I can say to my copy kids, here is last year's interview presentation and activities that we did in September. Review them. I want to hear about modification. Like, don't just modify them. Let's have a conversation if you think that they're inadequate in any way. And recognize it is Wednesday and you need to be ready to teach this by next Monday, right? We do almost all of our instruction in September and October, and then the rest of the year is production. And that doesn't mean we don't do touch-ups. You might think about like a spinning plate or basketball. You got to give it a couple extra little pushes here and there, November, February, little touch-ups. But our core is early in the year. And so across departments, design, copy and interviewing, reporting, photography, I look to activate our editors. And then when it comes to coverage, like you've got a spread, we work as teams. So our teams are generally 3 to 5 people, depending on the year. We look to balance ages of the students. We look to balance veteran versus first year. Where we can, we look to balance, gender and even interests and things like that. But we say, hey, red team, we've called them all sorts of, last year we did dinosaurs. So, hey, T-Rex, but hey, red team, you have the girls soccer spread due 4.5 or 5 weeks from now. And we normally have an editor who is assigned to that team. So now we've got editor, let's say +4, and they'll sit down when we're breaking coverage. They'll look at the last 2 or 3 yearbooks. We have them physically open in their laps, or we're looking at digital slides, so that when you recognize like, oh, the girls soccer team has twin sisters on it, let's tell that story. We're like, nope, we literally told that story last year. Got to freshen up the coverage. Let's go. We're always doing that coverage audit. And that's where the veterans, that's where I can say, hey, veterans, new stories, new coverage. They know exactly what I mean. And that's just one example then of be it a worksheet, a whiteboard, poster paper on the floor. That's where I let my editors say, like, how do you want to brainstorm coverage this year? Oh, last year we did whiteboards and we didn't really think that worked. Cool. Give me something new. And that's like, it's those little, this is an aside, but it's those little things that don't really matter. Like I still win, right? They're still brainstorming. I'm a little less busy. I'm empowering the kids, but they want to write on paper on the floor, or they want to do something with post-it notes because whiteboards didn't work for them last year. Have at it, because then they feel like they win and they got to try or innovate something new. That goes back 20 minutes ago to when we were talking about student empowerment and student choice in the newsroom. That's just one little snapshot of like, give them a win.
I want to be on the Triceratops team. All right. I always thought it was
Yes.
cool with the horn, that I'm definitely on that team. All right, Mike, I'm very curious for your answer to this next question because I've seen this too many times over a quarter century or more. How do you handle student drama? Okay, somebody in the group is not getting along or really disagrees with something, and there's a blow up or something like that. Granted, they're teenagers, we get it. How do you handle a situation like that? I think some advisors can't wait to hear what you have to say. How do you handle that? What do you do?
Well, I'll be upfront and tell you, sometimes I don't handle it well at all. Things you need to know about me. I cry at movies. I cry at really good marching band shows. I'm a marching band guy I did marching band for 21 years. So when I see a formation or a company front, I'm just like, oh my gosh, it's the most beautiful thing ever. I'm an emotional person. And so, in answer to the question, I, I pride myself, little p pride, on being in tune with the emotional tenor of the room. And I know that that's not everybody's desire, skill set, gift, whatever. It's the way I'm built. My heart is right out here on my sleeve. So, a couple things in answer to the question. My tuned in helps, and I can read the room pretty easily. Um, I try to name things as quickly as I can, and we've got one little office that's adjacent to our newsroom. And when something doesn't feel just right, I'll grab a kid, say, "Hey, can you stay after? Hey, can I grab you for a second?" And I often offer it up as I'm checking in. Now, it might be because I've sniffed something out, or it could be because an editor or somebody else has brought something to me. And how do they do that? Well, I tell them from day go, and mileage may vary, school policy may vary here with what I'm about to say, but email is a great way to get a hold of me. My editors have my cell phone number, and I do check in with parents explicitly to say, are you comfortable? I haven't had any parents in the last decade say no, but I do feel in this day and age it's important to be transparent. I will say most of my conversations there are in a group setting. Like I have my EICs and me, the four of us are on a chat together. I just had this conversation with parents yesterday. You can email, you can text, you can pull me aside, you can leave me a note, you could fill out a post-it note. Simmons, need to see you. There's so many ways of flagging something to me. that I really just try to make that culturally part of who we are. Sometimes I name it. Sometimes I go big. Sometimes that bites me in the butt. And what I mean by that is, I've got an issue with one or two kids and I address it with 40. And sometimes that is proactive, where I can see it coming, brewing, and I can nip it and address it to everybody. Sometimes I address it to everybody, and some of my editors are like, "Yeah, man, that wasn't the move. Only the two of them needed to hear it. The rest of us, like, you just made it, more awkward or worse or whatever." I get it. I get it wrong a lot, but I will say I'm proud of um, track record on working to address it and get out in front of it. And I really try to inculcate in my kids a team mentality. I'm adjacent to the editors in chief in the organizational flowchart. It is not me over everybody. I'm off to the side, but with and walking this journey with them, and really try to help them appreciate that idea of like I am well if we are well, and not just Mr. Simmons as well, but like you as an editor in chief, you as a first year member, you're not feeling safe or welcome here. You're not well, then we need to pump the brakes and get right by that before we can make a great book. And I'll interject too, just briefly. Positive staff culture, we go bowling together. We have t-shirts together. We have Tesserae staff lanyards for press passes, like uniform and ownership. We celebrate birthdays. There's so many things that you can do, again, proactively, kind of a theme here in our conversation, that can buy you, you can put fun in the bank and good cheer in the bank that you can withdraw in February when it's feeling a little pinchy and tight.
Yeah, make sure, folks, you have the fun element in there. Don't
So
don't let
important.
yearbook become a chore, because then everything kind of falls apart there. Actually, Mike, here's a quick side question. You mentioned parents. Do you have any kind of parental involvement? A little, a
Yeah.
lot? Maybe
Yep.
you don't want to deal with that at all. What about, now again, we're talking in your case, high school kids.
Yep.
Are parents somehow involved, even if it's just communicating some way? How do you handle that?
Yeah, so communication is email. I do text with some of them. I recognize each year it's a probably an obvious parallel, but the more um, I don't say it this way to my kids, but the more highly ranked they are in the organizational structure, usually the closer I am with their parents, which is to say the EIC's parents hear from me quite a bit because they're spending the most time with me and the most time in the lab. Next Thursday night, a week from now, we're starting our local camp that we run. We bring people to us for training and expertise. And at night on Thursday, we're going bowling, and that's across town. And I'm going to have 6 or 7 minivans arrive with parent chauffeurs to get 29 of us across town and out and over there. We are Wednesday people. We do Wednesday work nights to get us all in the lab. We have so many technology tools and online tools that if we really needed to, we could buckle down at home and get most of the work done. But again, culturally, I think it's good to be in front of each other, to be responsible to the work. I see you doing your work, you see me doing mine. So Wednesday afternoons, we will meet from 3:30 to 6 and ask students to attend 2 of those each month. And then in a deadline cycle, we will do a deadline night that pushes all the way out till 9 o'clock. And parents enter into this when a week before, our fun and social editor will work with me to publish a spreadsheet for a potluck dinner. And we'll say, hey, parents, it's pasta night this week. Hey, parents, it's soup and bread night this week. And that kind of support is absolutely fantastic. And we just get, crocks and pans and sheets of brownies and things. And then when I know we've seen each other at national conventions and whatnot, parent chaperones are huge for that as well. And that gives them appreciation and buy-in. They're like, wow, like people know what Corning, wait, yearbook is like a big deal. And it's super cool
Mhm.
that way.
I was going to say I smell pizza. I mean, most folks are like,
Yes.
okay, let's get some pizza delivery. That works
Yep.
too. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. All right, couple questions and we're done. Now, you're very active with JEA, Journalism Education Association. I've been a JEA member myself for like, I don't know, 10 years or something like that now. And I've encouraged advisors of all types, hey, if you have a few bucks, why don't you join JEA? Because I think they've got really good stuff that could serve any yearbook staff out there. And you're nodding your head. Why, or I give your advice, why should somebody check out JEA. I think they're terrific.
It is the source of professional development and professional community for us as journalism advisors. And I can give you a couple highlights, but really jea.org is where you want to be. First, there's the mentoring program. The JEA mentor program is so robust that we've got expert and experienced advisors nationwide who can typically, I'm not going to say always, but typically within the same state, JEA can pair you up with. It might not be somebody in your neighboring school district, might be a 2 hour drive if you ever want to go have a Diet Coke or cup of coffee or something stronger together to celebrate or commiserate. But having somebody in your neighborhood that can then either coach and support and mentor you, or then connect you with the resources that you lack, or talk you through getting in touch with censorship. Let's get you connected to the Student Press Law Center and just be that bridge. Maybe it's again confidant and somebody to vent to. The mentoring program, absolutely huge. CJET, Communication and Journalism Education Today, is the magazine. Comes out. Bradley Wilson is the editor-in-chief. He's going to be so angry if I get it wrong, but I think we get 2, if not 3 issues a year.
Twice a year, yeah, twice a
Twice
year.
a year, yeah, fall and spring, and actionable and really nicely chunked content. Sometimes you'll get this giant, research report from something that was done around the First Amendment or around female student journalists or things like that. But you can also get these little nuggets like here's an AP style quiz, or here's 5 quick tips to use when you're teaching photo composition to your students, things like that. The resources, the opportunities for the JEA curriculum are absolutely massive. Jim Streisel is the curriculum chair, I believe still, and publishes weekly content in school year. So he's about to activate again just little snippets. And you want more of this? Usually it's on Facebook and via email. You want more of this? Go to the JEA curriculum, and there's a whole unit here for business and marketing, how to set up an effective social media plan. Hey, you want to get started with podcasting? You've got broadcasts that just got thrown at you. There's so many resources. I could talk for another 45 minutes just about them. It's absolutely incredible. Not to mention when we gather twice annually at the conventions where they partner with the National Scholastic Press Association. We are recording here in 2025. I don't want to overly date it, but when we say November, we will see each other in Nashville at the fall convention, and in spring of 2026, the JEA NSPA National High School Journalism Convention will be in Minneapolis, and that rotates around the nation.
April and November. And
Yes.
I've been there, Mike. I'm stunned at the number of people that come to that. I mean, a lot
incredible.
of people
and
come
kids,
to that.
sorry to be clear, the kids too, right? I mean,
Yes.
whoever thought it was a great idea to put 4,000 high school students in the same hotel, that's what we do. It's great.
Final question. All right, free plug. All right, we're doing a podcast here, but Mike, you do your own yearbook podcast. If you would briefly, what is that? What do you include in that, and how can people find it?
Yeah, I really appreciate that, man. It's a freely available resource. I will fact check you modestly and say I actually wound down when we were about halfway through COVID. My previous litany of rock climbing, pet band, robotics, and just life as a dad of 4 and wanted to be a good husband and a good advisor for my kids. I've been on hiatus. I do have an itch to get back to it. It's called the Yearbook Whys, WHYS. It's available on all the platforms. But there are 3 seasons and 49 episodes archived of everything under the sun, from theme development to iPhone photography to how to manage business operations. I interviewed some former yearbook advisors of the year to kind of go back to the good old days and talk about where they came up through and things that they've seen change over the years. I will say a real standout for me was the privilege that I had to sit and interview the editors of the 2018 Parkland yearbook down at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. The kids that had to finish a yearbook after they had lost so many members of their community to gun violence in that school shooting. It still gives me chills hearing their story and how they remembered their classmates through the yearbook. I mean, you want to talk about powerful stuff. It was just stunning. They're not all that tonally. There's some that are very light and fun, but 49 episodes there, the Yearbook Whys. And thank you.
Mike, there's a term here, evergreen. It may have a little
Yes.
age on it, but it is evergreen. It is really good stuff. So,
Thank you.
folks, take the time to check that out. Mike, this was a great conversation. I mean, you just
Appreciate
shared
it.
some really great advice that I hope, again, my feature goes anywhere from elementary school up to college, probably for any of those levels. Some really good advice on organizing a yearbook staff. So, Mike, I appreciate your time today, and thank you very much for joining me.
Appreciate the opportunity. It's a real pleasure. Thank you.
A big thank you to advisor Mike Simmons for sharing great ideas and insights that can be emulated wherever you may be. If you have a student staff advisors, don't put all the pressure on yourself. That's an instant recipe for burnout. Instead, trust your kids. Let them lead with guidance from you. After all, you are the advisor. Advise your group and then watch them bloom as they realize that, yeah, this really is their project, something in school that they can actually determine. It may take a couple of years to fully implement, but you might be surprised. Kids really yearn for those chances to drive, if you will. Yeah, they may scratch the car a few times, but they will learn far more from the experience, lessons that they will keep for life. And you get to keep your sanity. I'd say that's a pretty good trade. Thanks again for listening to the Yearbooking Report podcast. I'm Scott Geezy. We'll see you next time.